Well, this is a first. I've actually explicitly been approached and asked to make this video, which, well, I've had people who I've already been speaking to suggest as people I make videos on. This is the first time someone's explicitly approached me to ask me to make a video. And given that it fits with my plans of re-examining most entries on the VTuber blacklist, I figured why not? So here we are. Alright, so whose entry are we re-examining today, you might be wondering? Why, none other than Succulicious. I might have mispronounced that, but I don't really care. This is one of the earliest entries on the blacklist. In fact, this one even predates my time as a PNG tuber. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that she's been accused of. Although there are two things I'm not going to take a look at. The first being the accusations of her scamming people, and the second being the accusations of botting. The first because, as far as I can tell, no one actually donated any money to her. Plus, it feels like manipulative would be a better label than scam. The second because, well, she's not active anymore, and also her original account is still up, but whoever currently runs the account claims that it's not the same person. Now, on the off chance that whoever is running the account is telling the truth and happens to watch this video, my advice is that you should adopt a different name if you want to use the same model. I say this because, while I can see a rebrand with that model working, the name is tainted. Plus, it's not like there's a precedent against using a model that is associated with a different identity for a new VTuber persona. You might remember the VTuber Gumpie from earlier this year. Well, her model has re-debuted as a different VTuber, namely Asmongold. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Although, in Succulicious' case, or rather Sin's, as I'm going to call her for the rest of the video, since Succulicious is kind of a mouthful, it's kind of a moot point since it's been over 3 years since they last posted. Now, you might be wondering, why am I even looking at this entry? Unlike Draco Starscale or Usagi Calamari, Sin is not active anymore. As a VTuber, that is. And you might have figured it out from how I phrased that, but Sin is still active, just not as a VTuber. Rather, she's active in Final Fantasy XIV, a game which I've streamed once, but not enough to really have an opinion on. Although, I will say that it does look promising from what I have played of it. And while Sin does keep her account private, thanks to the person who reached out to me, I do happen to know her current account name, Freya Stormsiege. Also, for the most part, I'm actually not going to be looking at most of the evidence on the VTuber Blacklist entry on Sin, mainly because I actually have the direct source that they used for making their entry, namely a document exposing Sin. And also because, well, they state that the full video from that a clip of Succulicious being a bigot is available on the VTuber Blacklist Discord server, but as far as I can tell, they don't provide any links to said server. And in fact, when I actually was speaking with them in DMs once, they denied that any such server existed, so I'm inclined to say that they are lying to me just for that. I have more words on that topic, but that's for another video in the near future. Also, I can't go over everything in the document since some of the links are dead, and I couldn't find archives of them. And much like with Melia the Maid, I once again am going to call out the Blacklist for providing an incomplete entry, since they accuse Sin of manipulation and art theft, yet never provide any evidence of either. I could maybe see the post where they claim she's a scammer being what they meant when they said manipulation, and in fact, I'd actually argue that's a more fitting term than scamming, but I couldn't find anything that resembled art theft. Now, I'm not just going to cover Sin. You might remember, if you've been with this channel long enough, how when I made my first video on Akuma Miko, I also briefly called out her partner, The Last Distress. Well, much like in that case, I'm going to call out Sin's partner as well, someone who's gone by the name Stellar Online. They're also a Final Fantasy XIV player named Valak Stormsiege. I'm mentioning that for reasons you'll understand later in the video. As I've stated before, but I have to state again since some people do not realize this, don't harass anyone I bring up in the video, and because the subject matter, content warning. Warning, this video contains discussion of the following topics: bigotry, and pedophilia. And also, since I use clips from John Carpenter's The Thing, it does contain more gore than normal. As such, viewer discretion is advised. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with how she's a bigot, since I already did mention that briefly in this segment. This one is pretty straightforward, and also, it's both lightest thing, so that's why I'm going with it first. But anyways, Sin is a bigot, with the most blatant example being in this video where she used a transphobic slur in VR chat. Now, it is worth noting that there is a longer video. I was going to say that I couldn't show it because the VTuber Blacklist says it's in their Discord server, yet I cannot find a link to said server. And again, this is the same server that they told me does not exist. But I was able to get in contact with the person who allegedly posted it, and well, if they can find it, I will just leave a link in the description. But anyways, there are other examples of Sin being a bigot, specifically from a few Google Docs. Now, it is worth noting that these don't have any videos, and not all of them have screenshots attached, so I'd say that their plausibility varies. First, we have a claim from someone who is anonymous. After they posted about their sister being hospitalized, and a venting channel in Sin's Discord deleted the post, then reposted it a few times. Someone else told that person to stop reposting, and they did. However, Sin proceeded to put them on blast and tell the whole server about this, shaming them while using a homophobic slur. I say this one is true because of the clip I showed earlier. Furthermore, according to someone named Kiwi, Sin, who she refers to as Rena, which is short for Serena, another name Sin has gone by, would throw around other slurs. On its own, this would be something I would say is plausible, but fortunately, according to someone named Russell Thy Jimmies, who will be important later on, she was also really casual about throwing around the N-word, and he actually provided screenshots. I don't have any screenshots of her saying the R-word, but I have no reason to believe that she didn't say it, and also, given that I was able to find the screenshots corroborating the claims that she would say the N-word, I don't have any reason to doubt those claims, so I am inclined to believe that the claim is true. Alright, you might have noticed that this segment is shorter than normal, but that's because it was kind of an odd situation. Namely, there was just too much for me to just briefly mention it in the intro segment, but at the same time, like, it only barely qualifies for its own segment. And I know that some people have complained about me calling out people for being bigoted when there are more serious stuff that I can cover, but well, I have to start off with the lighter accusations before I get into the heavier stuff. Like, give people a chance to get used to the temperature of the water before throwing them in the deep end, if you get what I mean. But before we jump into the deep end, there's one more thing we have to talk about, and it's going to be another short segment, specifically how manipulative Sin was.
I don't know what the hell's in there. It's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
Bennings, go get Childs.
What is this? What's going on? Hey, Harper, what is it?
Succulicious is very manipulative. According to a VTuber named Honeybee, she would try and isolate people so that Sin and her circle of friends were the only people they had. If she didn't like a relationship you had or a friend you made, either it was wrong or Sin would have to destroy it. She'd trick people into thinking she cared, but didn't actually care about anyone else, even if it hurt other people. Like with Jimmy's, for example. She wanted him even though he was underage. Yes, I am gonna get to that in a second, and this is gonna be another short segment, so just bear with me. In fact, she even abused people to the point of wanting to make them end their own life. Fortunately, as far as I can tell, things never actually got to that point, but still. And according to one statement from someone who chose to remain anonymous, she was so abusive to an ex of hers that they almost attempted to commit suicide. Now, I will admit that I don't have any proof aside from screenshots, which are just saying what the person answering it believes, but alright, I put this off for long enough. Time for the most damning thing about Sin. She's a pedophile.
Mac wants the flamethrower. Mac wants the what? That's what he said. Now move. Damn it.
You know, when I started this year, I didn't plan on covering this many pedophilic VTubers. I didn't want to develop a reputation for that sort of thing. It's actually one of the reasons why I opted to make a video on John De La Roz and that video calling out bad predator hunters, if only so I could talk about something else. But because of events largely beyond my control, specifically someone accusing me of being Draco Star Scale, Demon Lord Lucian deciding to act up at the same time I was working on my video on Draco, the VTuber Blacklist deleting an entry I was going to debunk, and also Sunwitch deciding to tag me in a post doxing Akuma Miko. Unfortunately, most of the VTubers I wound up making videos on this year wound up being VTubers who like kids in that way. I know this seems like an odd way to start this segment, but I'm just venting steam. But you know what? We got off topic. Let's get back to the video at hand. Sin is a pedophile. Unlike the past segments, there's actually quite a bit of evidence backing this up. First bit of evidence is from someone named Russell Thy Jimmies. He met Sin through, of all things, a 16 plus Gary's mod server that he had lied about his age to get into. Now, Jimmies had claimed he was 16. In reality, he was 13. However, Sin sent him nudes of herself, including a video of herself getting off at one point titled Project Panda. I don't have it, and even if I did, I'm not going to show it since, well, YouTube wouldn't like it, and I'm pretty sure that would qualify as revenge porn. Sin eventually did find out Jimmy's actual age. Now, if Sin had been horrified by this information and immediately blocked him, that would be one thing. It would be an unfortunate mistake. I'm not sure how defensible it would be, but that doesn't matter since that's not what happened. In fact, while I will admit that it's a bit hard to tell from these DMs, after finding out, she outright states, no one has to know, but Sin is actually on the record as sending nudes to 2 minors while knowing their age. Aside from Jimmy's, there's a different 13 or 14-year-old, age is kind of up ambiguous, as well, who Sin sent nudes to while knowing their age. This was actually much earlier than Jimmy, since I found screenshots showing this was in 2022. And well, the Sin Did It Twitter account found some questions that were being answered on a site that I'm assuming is supposed to be Tumblr, where the anonymous victim showed proof that was fortunately censored. Next, we have someone named Kiwi. Like Russell's, Kiwi did lie about their age, but unlike Russell's, they still made it clear that they were a minor, as they were 9 and lied about being 10/11, which in both the US and the UK, the latter is where Kiwi said they lived, is definitely a minor. Unfortunately, because Kiwi got a new computer, I don't have any screenshots of this, but according to Kiwi, Sin would openly talk about sexual topics in front of children, including Kiwi, and even posting actual porn in chats that children could access, which, given what I've mentioned so far with Jimmy's, I am inclined to believe. Kiwi also states that Sin would physically harm herself in front of actual children. I am assuming this was over video calls, not physically in front of them. And when Kiwi announced they wouldn't be active in the server, or they and Sin were a part of because their grandfather, this is because Kiwi lived in the UK while said grandfather lived in the US, and Kiwi could only talk to them on holidays since Kiwi was also balancing school and looking after their family. And well, because Kiwi's grandfather passed away, Kiwi naturally said that they were not going to be active in the server as much. Sin's response was to say that there was no reason for Kiwi, who was 12 at the time, to be upset because of how little they talked to said grandfather, even though it was not by choice. Which, to Sin, if you are reading this, go fuck yourself. Alright, now, as I mentioned in my Sunwitch video, I normally save those damning stuff for the end, but that's not what I'm doing this time. Sin hasn't caused anyone to take their own life as far as I know. Rather, the next thing I want to talk about is what Sin is up to right now, and how I know for a fact that Sin is a Final Fantasy XIV player. Alright, so this is the main reason why I made this video. As I mentioned earlier at the start of this video, Sin is still out there. You may remember how I mentioned her partner, a Final Fantasy XIV player who goes by Valak Stormsiege. Why did I specify he was a Final Fantasy XIV player? Well, as I mentioned, she's active in that game and goes by Freya Stormsiege. Let me prove there is a connection between the Valak Stormsiege I mentioned and Freya Stormsiege. First, how do I know the two are partners? Well, while Freya's lodestone is private, Valak's is not, and it happens to look like this. If you read the bottom, it says, I have all I ever wanted and all I ever need, my sweet, sweet Freya. Now, there are 3 other players on different servers who have the same name, as well as one who has a very similar sounding name. The one on the Marlith server is the only one whose profile explicitly mentions Freya, and I did check the Valak Stormsiege just to be safe, and that profile does not mention any Freya either. If any of the other 3 Valak Stormsieges, or the one Valakis Stormsiege, happens to stumble upon this video, I do apologize for bringing you up in this video if you get harassed. However, However, there is only one Freya Storm Siege in the entire game. The one on the Monolith server, the same as the Valak Storm Siege, whose lodestone, as I previously mentioned, is private. However, if you go to the frontline standings for January 2025, Freya's name does show up. So I've proven that there is a Freya Storm Siege, and that there is a connection between a Freya Storm Siege and a Valak Storm Siege. So how do I know that Freya Storm Siege is Sin? Well, in a Discord server that Freya operated, which the person who approached me was able to infiltrate, she posted a picture of herself and her partner. While I don't have the exact screenshot proving she posted it, the file name that was entered by default was titled Freya x Valak, and Sin has posted selfies of herself. The screenshot I showed early on that listed one of her identities as Nintendo Girl, well, she also posted a selfie of herself on Reddit using that username. Freya and Nintendo Girl are the same person. So in other words, Freya is Succulicious. Alright, now that I've proven that Freya and Sin are the same person, I know what you are now wondering. Why am I bringing Valak up, you might ask? Well, if he was in the dark about this, let's say he met Sin, or rather Freya's Storm Siege, while playing the game, and started a relationship with her after getting to know her, I would not actually bring him up. In fact, I probably would have actually tried to reach out to him and give him a warning. But according to the person who approached me about this, he's not in the dark. In fact, not only is he aware of what Sin has done, but he's also helping her cover up her misdeeds. Specifically, the person who reached out to me told me that he had attacked and threatened to dox 3 of her victims. Not only that, but I also found a screenshot where he basically downplays what Sin did. In other words, Valak is knowingly defending a predator. In my video on Celestial VT, I called out her friend Lyra for knowing what was going on in Celeste's Discord server but not reporting it, so I am putting Valak on blast for covering up Sin's antics. But you know what? I've talked about this enough, so let's wrap this up, shall we?
Damn it, child, torch it!
Sin, if you're watching this, just leave. Don't even think of coming back to the internet. Get help, turn yourself into the authorities, and never even think of coming back. As for Valak, I sure hope that whatever Sin gives you is worth having the reputation of defending a pedophile. I know this was a shorter video compared to what I normally put out, but well, it was kind of a last-minute edition. But anyways, thank you for watching. As I mentioned, this was kind of a last-minute decision to make this particular video, and my next video will not be until December since I'm going to be working on a big project. But once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. I'm Andreas Rebel, and I'll see you on my next assignment. Later.